You know, I noticed that I was on the agenda for speaking right after lunch, both today and tomorrow. So that tells me one of two things. Either they think that my presentations are going to be interesting enough to keep you awake after a big lunch, or that they really don't matter and you can just go to sleep and nobody's listening. So I'm a filler. But anyway, it's good to be here. Welcome to Mississippi. For those of you that have never been here before, this is a wonderful facility down here, probably thanks to Katrina, but a very, very nice facility. And, you know, Mississippi is a unique state in a lot of ways, but you know, just before Christmas, I saw a story in the paper about an elderly lady that had been stopped for speeding just south of Jackson, Mississippi on Interstate 55. And the highway patrolman that pulled her over, you know, he walked up to the window of her car and said, "Ma'am, I need to see your license and registration." So she handed him a bunch of cards, and you know, with her license, registration, insurance card, but also among those was a concealed weapons carry permit. So he took a look at that, and he said, well, he had to ask her, he said, "Well, ma'am, I see you have a concealed weapons permit. Do you happen to have a weapon in the car with you right now?" And she said, "Yes, officer, I do. I have a loaded .45 in my glove compartment." And he said there was something about her answer and the way she looked that led him to believe that wasn't all. So he asked again. He said, "Ma'am, do you have any other weapons in your car?" And she said, "Yes, I have a 9mm Glock in my center console." And he said, well, he had to ask at least one more time. So he said, "Ma'am, do you have any other weapons in your possession?" And she said, "Well, yes, I have a snub-nosed .38 in my purse." And he looked at her and he said, "Ma'am, just what in the world are you afraid of?" And she said, "Not a thing." Okay, what I want to do today is I want to cover our results from our field trials for this past year. We conducted field trials in a number of different states and in multiple regions of the country, and had quite a few different experiences in this regard. But before we get started, and I'll go through this very rapidly because Dr. Idy and Dr. Lalitha both covered this very, very well this morning. But basically, Sumo Grow, again, as a reminder, is a unique patented combination of multiple strains of microbes in high concentration. And it is sourced from naturally isolated soil microbes. Dr. Lalitha maintains this in pure parental strains in multiple locations. And you can see the various microbe classes listed there. The primary functions, again, as has been stated before, are nitrogen fixation, phosphate solubilizers, microbes that act as nutrient cyclers, microbes that encourage phytohormone production, and microbes that act as biological control agents. Sumo is maintained in a liquid humate carrier at a pH of 7.0. And the humates obviously provide some slight contribution to soil organic matter, and the pH of 7.0 also helps provide some slight buffering capacity. Now, in 2011, we conducted field trials in 11 different states that encompassed the regions of the Southeast, the Northeast, the Midwest, the Rocky Mountain region, and the Southwest. And we'll just sort of dive right into these. In Nebraska, and this was in sort of north central Nebraska near Plainview. If any of you are familiar with Plainview or the O'Neill area, it was right in that area. But we conducted a corn trial, field corn. We had 4 replicants with 3 treatments. The treatments were Sumigro with 100% fertilizer, and the Sumigro was applied in split applications. Sumigro plus 75% fertilizer, which basically amounted to leaving off the side dress, okay? And then 100% fertilizer as the third treatment and the control. We had approximately 5 acres per treatment per replicant. Now these are some of the pre-harvest results from taking plant measurements and soil measurements. We had significantly greater soil nitrogen availability in the Sumigro plus 75% fertilizer or no side dress compared to the other 2 treatments. If we look at bricks, we had significantly higher bricks in both the Sumigro treatments compared to the control. There were no significant differences in both stalk circumference and stalk height, but if you look over here at root length, we find that we did have significantly greater root length in both the Sumigro with 100% fertilizer compared to the control, and then again in the Sumigro with the no side dress compared to the control. Now, I do find that very significant, and as we go through some data today, you'll see that that's pretty consistent, that we're finding that we do have greater root length, greater root development in Sumigro-treated crops. In terms of brace roots, again, very similar as to the root length in terms of results. We have significantly higher numbers of brace roots on both the Sumigro treatments compared to the control. Okay, at harvest time, a weigh wagon was brought in to individually weigh each of the test plots as they were harvested, and test weight and percent moisture were recorded at that time. Now, in terms of actual yield results, we found that in this particular trial, we did not have any difference in yields between the 3 treatments. But here is the difference that was experienced. And this goes back, Dusty, to what you said just a little bit ago. In this particular trial, with the Sumigro and no side dress, this particular trial participant farmer in Nebraska experienced a $47 per acre advantage with cutting back fertilizer and using Sumigro. Okay, on the same farm, we also did a soybean trial, and in this particular application, we had the Sumigro, 20 acres of Sumigro, and the entire gallon was applied at emergence. And then we have the control. In terms of pre-harvest measurements, again, we saw that we had a significantly higher soil nitrogen availability, significantly higher bricks. Root nodules were also significantly greater, as was taproot length and plant height. In yields, again, like in the corn, no significant difference in yields. The Sumigro treated was slightly higher in this case. Okay, in Arkansas, this was located basically in the northeast Arkansas area. In a corn trial, we had 2 treatments, Sumigro plus 100% fertilizer applied in the Sumigro applied in the split application, compared to 100% fertilizer. Corn was planted on April the 9th, and we had 20 acres per treatment. In this particular trial, we did see a significant difference in the actual yield, with the Sumigro plus fertilizer giving us 113 bushels per acre compared to 96 bushels per acre for the straight fertilization. In Illinois, in a trial conducted by Two Rivers Farm Services, a producer co-op up there, we had a comparison of, and I hit the wrong button, we'll go back. We had a comparison of Sumigro plus fertilizer and then 100% fertilizer. 2 reps with each treatment, 30-inch rows with conventional tillage, in fields that ran a typical corn, soybean rotation. And here's the results from that trial. You see that in replication 1, the Sumigro significantly out-yielded the 100% fertilizer, and the same in Rep 2. We ended up with a 17% increase in yield in Rep 1 and a 32% yield increase in Rep 2. In Rep 1, this amounted to a $101 per acre advantage, and in Rep 2, a $198 per acre advantage. In Arizona, there was a corn silage trial that was conducted, and this was grown under conventional flood irrigation. And the premise of this was to compare Sumigro treated corn with conventionally fertilized. Sumigro was applied at the rate of 1 gallon per acre via the drip irrigation directly into the irrigation ditch. You can see the fertilizer treatment using anhydrous ammonia applied over 4 irrigations for a total of 200 units, along with dried human sludge that's readily available in that area. Okay, again, the Sumigro was applied, the total 1 gallon was applied at planting. There were no split applications here, whereas the nitrogen and sludge were applied over 4 irrigations, and the irrigation was monitored to determine water usage. These are the results of the corn silage trial. There were 36 acres each. The total yield was 588 tons for the Sumigro treated compared to 503 for the control. In terms of yield per acre, we had 16.3 tons compared to 13.9. The value was $40 a ton, so our total value was $23,500 for the treated and $20,100 for the control. This amounted to a 16.8% yield increase, or a yield increase of 2.4 tons per acre. In Arkansas, we did a cotton trial comparing 1 gallon per acre of Sumigro plus 50% fertilizer compared to 100% fertilizer. Again, 20 acres per treatment. And in pre-harvest measurements, we found that Brix was significantly higher in the Sumigro treatment compared to the 100% fertilization. Soil nitrogen availability was significantly higher, as was plant nitrogen uptake. In terms of plant height, again, we saw a significant difference in the Sumigro versus the control. The number of bolls produced was significantly higher, as was taproot development. Now, this was also something that we noted as we were taking our measurements. We found that in the control, we averaged 1.2 bolls that had some degree of boll rot per plant at that point in time, compared to none in the Sumigro treated area. We couldn't find any boll rot at all in the Sumigro treated area. In yield, once the cotton was harvested, we had a 1,203 pound per acre yield in the Sumigro treated compared to 1,143 pounds in the control, and this gave that farmer a $35 per acre advantage compared to the cost of the 100% fertilizer. We also did a watermelon trial in Arkansas, and in this particular instance, we planted Abbott and Cobb variety watermelons at a density of 1,000 plants per acre. They were planted on May 20 using minimal tillage and grown under plastic. They were furrow irrigated, and we had 2 treatments. The treatments were Sumigro plus reduced fertilizer and then 100% fertilizer. Now take a look at the pictures here if you would. These 2 pictures were taken, after the 1/3 harvest. Okay? So they had gone through and taken 3 consecutive harvests off of these watermelons. And when I took these pictures, the difference between the 2 treatments was quite remarkable, and I think it's readily apparent in the pictures themselves. Again, this was after 3 harvests had been conducted. This is from the Sumigro treated, and this is from the conventional fertilizer or the control. You'll note the difference in terms of vigor and viability. These plants were still actively growing and actively producing. When you take a look at these, you had the vines were dying, and you actually had a lot of dead areas that you can see here in different parts of the picture. So these vines were done. Okay, they can go in and take a 4th harvest off of this area. Now, in terms of our measurements, we had a significant advantage in the Sumigro treated area compared to the control in terms of bricks. We had a significant advantage also in the soil nitrogen availability and in actual nitrate uptake in the melons themselves. Now, one interesting note here on this bricks. We did the bricks measurements, and then the particular person that I was working with on these trials said, I've invited a guy to come in to give us a little hand here. And I said, what do you mean? What's he going to do? And he said, well, he is considered the expert taste tester for watermelons in our area. And he's the one that tells us when our watermelons are ready to be harvested and they have the greatest amount of sweetness to them. You know, they have the best taste. And so he said, you've taken all these bricks measurements, so now I'm going to put you to the test. And we're going to see how well you match up with our expert. So they brought the guy in, and we lined the melons out, you know, and he went down the line. We had a whole bunch more than that, but he went down the line, and he tasted them, and he started comparing, you know, and checking off the ones that were sweeter than the others. And lo and behold, it matched up 100% to our bricks measurements. So every melon that had the higher bricks, he also picked that melon. So it's a pretty good taste tester. He did a darn good job. Okay, in terms of actual yield, we ended up with significantly higher yields in the Sumigro versus the control in all 3 primary harvests. Okay? To me, that's significant. That in every harvest, you know, we ended up with greater yields, and in terms of total yield, we ended up over the whole season with a 28% yield advantage in the Sumigro versus 100% fertilizer. And this also translated into a greater than 28% advantage in return per acre. And you'll look here and you'll see value per acre was over $3,600 for the Sumigro compared to $2,800 for the control, which gave us right at an $800 per acre difference. And again, these are the total values, total yields on the 20 acres of Sumigro versus 20 acres of 100% fertilization, and then the total dollar value for those particular plots. Okay, we also conducted trials in Montana. We had trials that we conducted with alfalfa and with a oats, barley, and Austrian winter pea silage mix. Now, in the alfalfa trials, we compared 3 different treatments. We had a ½ gallon of Sumigro per acre applied, 1 gallon of Sumigro per acre, and then a gallon per acre of DRAM. Now, this is a product that is commonly used in that region of the country and is sold. Most farmers in that region use DRAM. It is a fish hydrosylate-based fertilizer. Okay? So again, we were comparing against a very commonly used fertilization product in that region. Now, in these particular trials, we had two different alfalfa fields that we were looking at. And in field 1, we had the half-gallon per acre Sumigro, the 1 gallon, and then the dram. And you'll see that this particular treatment had a significantly higher yield than the other two. As a matter of fact, it gave us about a 27% advantage in dry matter yield per acre. And these were average yields per cutting, okay, per cutting. In field 2, there was no middle treatment, just the first Sumigro treatment and then the dram. And again, in this one, we had a significantly higher yield per cutting in terms of dry matter per acre compared to the control, which was the dram, and that was right at a 48% yield advantage. In Nebraska, we also conducted some alfalfa trials, and in this particular trial, we applied a total of 1.5 gallons per acre of Sumigro, with a half gallon per acre being applied at green up, and then followed by half gallon per acre treatments after each cutting. This was compared to two other treatments, a 3 gallon per acre foliar feed product out of Minnesota, a product that's produced in Minnesota, and then a control that was his standard fertilization program. In this particular trial, the Sumigro treated plot had significantly higher dry matter yields per acre per cutting average compared to the foliar and the control product. Now, if we look at the combination of both the Montana alfalfa field trials and the Nebraska alfalfa field trials, we find that our average Sumigro advantage per cutting resulted in 600 to almost 800 pounds of dry matter per acre increase. And in those areas, their alfalfa is valued at $220 to $290 per ton currently. And so the Sumigro dollar advantage per cutting amounted to somewhere between $78 and $100 per acre per cutting. Now, in our oats, barley, and winter pea study up in Montana, we also had some very interesting results. This is in southwestern Montana, just outside of Sheridan, and that's just northwest of Yellowstone National Park, okay, to put that into perspective for you. In this region, they're a low rainfall area, so pretty much everything that this particular rancher grows is under pivot, so he applies water. Now, one thing that we noticed, and you'll notice right here in this slide, we found that this particular rancher was practicing a rather unique fertilization program. He had come up with a way to get time-released fertilization. And what they had done is they have a lot of deer up there, so they had trained their deer to defecate right over the stems, and so the pellets would stick on the stems and give them a time-release fertilization pellet. Now, I want to ask you, how many times in a million would that happen? By the way, Al Smith is the one that happened to find it. I don't know what that says about him, but he's the one that found it. Okay. And we had two different trials here in our oats, barley, and winter pea silage mix. And in field 1, we had two different treatments with the Sumigro compared again to the dram. Okay, we had significantly higher yields in both Sumigro treatments compared to the dram. And this gave us, in this particular case, a $40 per acre advantage over the control. And with this treatment, a $6 per acre advantage over the control. In field 2, we had significantly higher yields, and basically what happened here was this was in lowlands, and they had a very heavy snowpack last winter, and and then a late spring warm-up. So what happened is he ended up with a lot of late spring, April and May flooding. And so that impacted total yields here. This had no flooding, and we had significantly higher yields here. In this particular area, we had, again, significantly higher yields in the 2 Sumagrow treatments compared to the DRAM. Approximately a 40% yield increase. In this treatment, compared to the DRAM or the control, we had a $262 per acre advantage, and in this one, a $126 per acre advantage. Other observations that we made while we were up there, if you look at this particular picture here, they harvested the silage mixture in mid-August, and then he immediately followed that up with his winter crop of cereal rye and turnips. Okay? And under that particular pivot where he planted these, we had the various treatments. And so Dr. Smith was up there with me, and as we were going around through the various treatment areas and looking at the early development of the turnips and the cereal rye, we noted quite readily, as did the rancher himself, Larry Meloff, we noticed quite readily that in the Sumagrow treated area that we had significantly greater germination and early growth rate compared to the DRAM treated area. And this had not had any additional Sumagrow applied. So the last Sumagrow that was applied was the Sumagrow that was applied in May when he planted the original silage mixture. Okay? So this is some evidence that we are getting some good residual impact. We noted that the turnips, we had a significantly denser stand of turnips in this area compared to the control treatments, and the cereal rye was fully double the height. In the DRAM treated area, the cereal rye was averaging 2 inches in height, and in the Sumagrow treated area, it was averaging 4 inches in height. It was all drilled the same day. Okay? No difference in planting time. Some of the other observations, again, in the alfalfa, we noted significantly greater nodule development in the treated versus the control. This is also one of the, Larry Meloff considers this a big disadvantage, not an advantage. But the Sumagrow treated fields were drawing in all the deer, all the wildlife, and they were eating them out of house and home. Okay? He has deer like we have rats in Mississippi, and they're everywhere. And so we noted as we drove through these fields in the mornings and the early evenings, late afternoon, the Sumagrow treated areas were full of deer, and you could find very few deer in the other treatments. So again, that's something that we've noted over and over, and Dr. Lalitha brought this up earlier this morning. We also noted significantly greater root development in the Sumagrow treated plants. Okay, in Nebraska we also did a native grass trial, and the native grass mixture was a mixture of Indian grass, switchgrass, big and little bluestem, and alfalfa. The treatments consisted of 1 gallon per acre Sumagrow applied at green up, the total 1 gallon applied at green up, a 4 gallon per acre foliar treatment that was applied over 3 different time periods, and then the control, which was no application of any fertilizer. Okay, in this particular case, we found that the Sumagrow treatment significantly out-yielded the foliar, and the foliar is a product that is highly used in that particular region. There was not a significant difference, however, between that and the control. In the bricks. This is not yield, this is bricks. We did have a significant difference in bricks in the Sumagrow versus the foliar, but again, just a very slight, non-significant difference in bricks between the Sumagrow and the control in this particular case. terms of yield, we had significantly higher dry matter yields per acre in the Sumigro treated compared to both the foliar and the control. 14% yield increase over the foliar and a 16.5% yield increase compared to the control. In Louisiana, we conducted forage trials. Again, these were at Mr. Taylor's place. And these are the first treatments that were made. Okay, Dusty talked to you about prior treatments, but the data that I'm presenting to you today is from the first round of treatments that we made. In the first round of treatments, we had multiple paddocks. Again, as Dusty said, we had 8 different paddocks, and we had each treatment was replicated at least once, okay, throughout the 8 paddocks. So we had more than one treatment of each of these treatments to make our comparisons. We had 1 gallon per acre Sumigro, 1 gallon per acre of Sumigro plus fertilizer, and then straight fertilizer. Okay, in our measurements, we found that soil nitrogen was significantly greater in the Sumigro plus fertilizer and the Sumigro compared to the straight fertilizer. We found that in terms of bricks, we had significantly higher bricks in the Sumigro alone compared to the Sumigro plus fertilizer or the control, which is 100% fertilizer. In dry matter yield per acre, again, significantly greater yields in the Sumigro and the Sumigro plus the fertilizer compared to the control. Significantly higher crude protein, and the TDN was slightly higher, significantly higher here, slightly higher but non-significant here compared to the control. In Alabama, this was on Teddy Gentry's place up in Fort Payne, Alabama. For those of y'all that are familiar with Teddy, Teddy is from the country music group Alabama. And so we've been working with Teddy for quite a number of years on various projects. And so we conducted field trials at his place. And Teddy is very much like Dusty. He uses his place as a mini experiment station. So we were able to do a lot of different things, but we had basically 2 primary treatments. Teddy's been using a fish oil, sea salt, and calcium mixture for several years now, applied at the rate of 4 gallons per acre, and so that was his standard fertilization practice over the last several years. So we compared that to the Sumigro. And the pastures were predominantly Bermuda, fescue, Dallas grass, crabgrass, and clover mix. Okay, in our results here, we found that in terms of soil nitrogen availability, we had significantly higher soil nitrogen compared to the control or the other treatment, the fish oil treatment, significantly higher plant nitrogen uptake, and significantly higher bricks values. In dry matter yields per acre, average per cutting, in the Sumigro we averaged 2,650 pounds per acre, and in the fish oil treatment, 2,430, again a significant difference. In Pennsylvania, this was south central Pennsylvania, just west of Harrisburg. We conducted field trials with a grower there. Again, if we look across our treatments, we had a control and then Sumigro, and here their typical practice was no fertilization, and so we wanted to compare Sumigro against no fertilization, again, their common practice, and also compare it on a cost per acre basis and that kind of thing. We did find, as expected, a significantly higher soil nitrogen availability, plant nitrogen uptake, significantly higher bricks. And in yields, we had significantly higher yields in both hay fields, 4,550 pounds per acre dry matter average per field 2. We also noted at the time of harvesting the hay, there was also a significant difference in plant height between the two treatments in both fields. Okay, in Virginia, this is in north central Virginia near Remington. We conducted some forage field trials. In November, we actually had a field day there, and area producers were invited in to participate in the field day. We had a morning seminar session, and then that afternoon we went out and had a pasture walk. And so we had excellent participation in that, and a lot of good involvement. And one of the things that we noted at this particular point in time, again, this was late November, and they had already had several hard frosts. We were beyond our summer trials, and I'll present that summer trial data to you today, and some of their cool season grazing trials, the data that we have at this point. But we did note one thing, and I've been in continuous contact with the producer, and we're also working with an ag consultant up there. And one thing that we have noted quite readily here is that in the Sumigro treated areas compared to the other treatments, which include broiler litter and an NPK treatment, okay, an NPK applied according to soil analysis, we noted that the frost tolerance is significantly greater in the Sumigro treated versus the conventionally fertilized or the broiler litter fertilized pastures. And at the time that we were there, particularly in the fescue and clover pastures, it was quite apparent. As I said, they had already had several hard frosts, and we noted that in the other treatments, the white clover was completely curled up and curled under, okay, the leaves on the white clover. And in the fescue, we had, in the upper 2 to 3 inches of the blade of fescue, it had a lot of yellowing and browning to it, so you had some frost die-off, okay, in the upper tip of the blades. In the Sumigro treated areas, it was like it had never frosted. We could detect no damage. Chuck and I both were looking at this. So it was quite amazing. And again, like I said, we've been in contact with them numerous times since then, and that continues to be the case. And it's also the case in their ryegrass, and turnip mixture. Okay, now, in the summer forage trials, okay, we had 5 different treatments. We had a control, which was no fertilization. We had an NPK, broiler litter, NPK plus Sumigro, and Sumigro alone. We see that in terms of soil nitrogen availability, the highest was the broiler litter at this point in time compared to the others. The second was the Sumigro alone. In terms of plant nitrogen uptake, the highest was in the Sumigro treatment compared to the others. In bricks, the Sumigro and the control had significantly higher bricks measurements compared to the other fertilization regimes. And then in dry matter yield, we had significantly greater dry matter yields per cutting in both the Sumigro alone and the Sumigro plus the 50% NPK. Now we also have been and are currently conducting some game test trials, cattle game test trials at the same location. And Lakota Ranch, where we're doing these trials, they are a private ranch, but they also conduct a public bull test, forage bull test, that is sponsored and endorsed by Virginia Tech University and the Virginia Beef Cattle Improvement Association. So they work in conjunction with both of those two entities in the conduction of this bull test. So we did a game trial. The whole point of the bull test is to test gain of bulls. Okay? So we split the bulls into 3 different treatment groups, 12 bulls per treatment group. And the treatments were, let's go back. treatments were Sumigro only, NPK only, and a control. Okay? And again, the NPK was applied according to soil test analysis results. This particular trial was started in mid-October of last year on fescue and clover pastures, and all groups were rotated among all treatments after each wave so that we completely eliminated any opportunity or potential for bias. Now, in terms of our results to date, okay, now these are the results to date. We'll have more later as we finish up this test. But the results to date, for the Sumigro, we had significantly higher average daily gains over this time period compared to the NPK or the control. You note that we're averaging at least 0.2 of a pound more average daily gain. And at the value of pounds of cattle today, that's pretty significant. That's a lot of additional value. Okay, we also are currently doing a heifer gain trial, again at the same location. And in this trial, we have 40 yearling heifers that are assigned across 2 treatments, a Sumigro and a control. And our forages that they're grazing here are rye, ryegrass, and turnips. And the heifers are rotated between the treatments after each wave, again, to take away all potential for bias. And again, to date, we have significantly higher average daily gains in the heifers in the Sumigro treated compared to the control. Again, right at 0.2 of a pound difference. Okay, we also conducted trials at Murray State University, and that's located in western Kentucky. And these trials were under the control of Dr. Jim Davis, who was the animal science department head there at Murray State. What we did there was we had a summer stocker grazing trial, and we grazed a summer annual of BMR sorghum. Okay? We had 4 different treatments. We had 1 gallon per acre Sumigro, 2 gallons per acre of raw milk, 100 pounds per acre of ammonium nitrate, and then a control. Now, if we look at our results, we find that our bricks was significantly higher in the Sumigro and the raw milk treatments compared to the other 2 treatments. And then in average daily gain, our average daily gains were significantly higher in the Sumigro and the ammonium nitrate treatments compared to the other 2 treatments. And here we averaged right at 0.3 or 3/100ths, excuse me, pound more average daily gain. And again, this is just graphically representing those results. Higher average daily gains, higher bricks in our Sumigro compared to the other treatments. Michigan State University, at their Lake City Research Station, conducted field trials on both alfalfa and a typical summer forage mix. In the alfalfa, we had 3 different treatments. We had Sumigro at 1 gallon per acre at green up, followed by a 1/2 gallon per acre after each cutting. Sumigro at a 1/2 gallon per acre at green up, followed by a 1/2 gallon per acre at each cutting, and then our control of no fertilizer application. And we had 3 different cuttings or harvests of the alfalfa. In these particular trials, we had significantly higher gains in both the Sumigro treatments compared to the control. Okay, and these were average dry matter yields per cutting, and it amounted to about a 34% advantage over the control. Now, one thing to note though, when you're doing research at a university, one of the things that those professors want to do is to, when they design a research experiment, they want to control as many variables as possible. So this particular trial was designed so that they cut the alfalfa at exactly the same date, same time for each treatment. okay, regardless of stage of development. But one thing that Dr. Roundtree up there, who was heading up this particular project, one thing that he clearly noted was that at each cutting, the control was in partial bloom. The half-gallon per acre Sumagrow was in half bloom, and the full gallon was in full bloom. Okay? So in other words, it was maturing much quicker. Okay? Much quicker with the Sumagrow. And so what Dr. Roundtree told me was, he said, you know, next year we're going to repeat a lot of these trials with a lot of the same participants, because there's other things we want to look at, including residual, for this coming year. But what he told me, he said, this year in these trials, we're not going to do that, because that was a big mistake on our part. He said, we're going to harvest each cutting when it is physiologically ready to be cut. You know? So basically, these were beyond the optimum point to cut, you know, in terms of stage of maturity, but they were cutting them all at the same point. Okay? But what that means is that based on Dr. Roundtree's estimation, they would have easily obtained at least one additional cutting of the Sumagrow treated plots compared to the other. Okay, we also did a pasture trial comparing pastures made up of orchard grass legume mixtures, and our treatments there were very similar. 1 gallon per acre Sumagrow at green up, and then a half gallon per acre at green up, followed by a half gallon per acre at 4 weeks. And then our control. And then it was grazed throughout the season, and they did clippings from yield cages throughout the season to measure dry matter yield. And in terms of bricks, we found that we had, again, significantly higher bricks in our Sumagrow treatments compared to the control, and significantly higher yields in both Sumagrow treatments compared to the control. Again, these were average dry matter yields. Clippings were made every 30 days, okay, to take these dry matter yields. Now, we do currently have other trials going, and we're awaiting data from various trials. In Idaho, we had some trials with sugar beets, with potatoes, and out in California, there's currently trials underway with lettuce production and so forth. So there's a number of other things that we're taking a look at, awaiting final data to see where we are. You know, basically, in summary, across all trials and across all regions, here are the things that we noted that we have in common. Okay? First of all, we almost always see an advantage in bricks, okay, with the Sumagrow treated plots. So we see a bricks advantage. We typically, not always, but we typically see a yield advantage. Yield advantage obviously can vary according to growing conditions, moisture conditions, and so forth. But we typically do see some kind of yield advantage. We typically see a revenue per acre advantage. Okay? Some of the other things, though, that I've mentioned earlier that we have noted is that we are seeing an increased ability in virtually every crop that we've worked with to have greater stress tolerance, no matter what that stress, okay? Whether it's frost, whether it's hurricane damage, drought damage, so forth, okay? So we're seeing advantages there that I call the intangibles, the things that we're not going to notice if the growing season is wonderful, okay? But if we have challenges in that growing season, then the things, the intangibles that I'm seeing in terms of that increased stress resistance or stress tolerance are certainly going to pay dividends, you know, when we experience challenges. So that's what we're seeing so far. As Wayne said, we have quite an array of trials planned for 2012. Again, one of the things that we're going to be doing is we're going to be continuing with several of our 2011 trial participants, because we certainly want to see how the product performs on the exact same ground under a different year's conditions. Okay? We also want to evaluate residual. What is the residual impact of the product? What kind of population buildup impact do we get? And how does that benefit us in yields and in buildup of soil organic matter and so forth? So we certainly want to continue to evaluate that. I think that's something that can pay huge dividends going into the future.